Hello everybody, this is Mithril Zenith, and I wanted to make a little bit of a video on a topic that I have been thinking about for a little while now, especially in regards to Fire Emblem Engage, but also Fire Emblem Shadows of Valentia, really any Fire Emblem with reclassing or class options. And that idea is building a unit for that unit, or what that unit, claims to want or need, versus building a unit for the actual game and for the actual army that they're a part of. What I mean is, and I will use Clanne as the example because this is the one that I've seen most often, is I hear people all the time say, well, Clanne has better, strength growth and defense growth and lower than his magic and resistance growth. He has higher strength growth at base, personal base. And so because of that, he should be a physical class. You should make him a hero. You should make him, a royal knight or like a griffin knight or something. And it's like, okay, where do I begin with this? Can Clanne work in these other classes? Yes. Is Clanne better in these other classes than in mage? Maybe. Will Clanne be more useful to you in these other classes than he is in mage, knight, or sage? I don't actually know if that's true. And here's why. Sometimes in Fire Emblem, you are given units that seem to have stats that don't really add up. Stats that push them towards one direction or another. However, do these stats push them in that direction, any given direction, enough to make them better than any other unit in that particular class? Or is there enough of a need for that class that they fill? Generally with Fire Emblem, and this is not necessarily true for all games, but generally with Fire Emblem, units that can be mages are better as mages than as other unit types, even if they are technically slightly better than other types because of some slight differences. Because having some base magic and base magic growth puts them so far ahead of units that don't. And that's just specifically mages. Specifically mages, and specifically the games like Engage that have a magic strength split. For instance, if I were to make my Clanne a Wyvern Knight, I don't know the exact growth off the top of my head, he would have a decent strength growth and pretty decent defense growth. But that strength and defense growth wouldn't be unique above more dedicated physical units that have even higher natural base, strength, defense, whatever growths. What Clanne does have is that he has, granted, a fairly mild magic growth, but he has a decent enough magic base. Even when I change him over to Wyvern Knight, he still has 3 magic. And this is assuming I could promote him at all from level 5. And so I guess his base isn't super good. If you put the effort into him, maybe he does become a better physical unit than a magic unit. But is he better enough to warrant the second seal, the training, the shift, especially if you are trying to avoid leveling him as mage at all? That means you'll basically be not using him, second sealing him, leveling him up, and then transitioning him, at which point he ends up being so behind the curve that it's not really worth it. People bring this argument up about Jean all the time. It's like, hey, Jean is a lot better if you just change him to the class that you want him to be in first, before you change him, don't level him. I see both of these arguments. I see both the argument that you want to level him, get him as a promoted class as soon as possible, and then put him in the promoted class you wanted him to be in. And I see the argument of, wait, don't level him at all, just put him straight into the other class because Martial Monk doesn't have great growths for him to capitalize on. Level him up as that promoted class. Wait until you get a second seal. Well, you don't get a second seal until chapter 7. So by which point, you're giving up several chapters of John training, and then you have to train a level 1 unit all the way up. Feels bad. Feels worse. I don't know. And so Jean is kind of an exception to this rule, where Jean can be whatever you want him to be. Other units a little bit more limited. And it's not even necessarily a matter of they'll be bad or they'll be good or they'll be better, but it's like, what do you need? For instance, Goldmary here. A lot of people suggest putting Goldmary over into, where is it? Great Knight. Where the heck is Great Knight? Here it is. Putting Goldmary over into Great Knight because it really capitalizes on her defense. True. That is something you can do. However, if you do that, you are limiting Goldmary's potential as an out-of-the-box hero for Brave Assist. With, honestly, decent speed and defense. You're giving up her speed in order to capitalize on her defense. You could also transition her, I don't know, to what, Swordmaster? And have a Swordmaster with decent defense and slightly better speed. Although at that point she just ends up being kind of a little bit worse of a Kagetsu at base. Speaking of Kagetsu, he's not immune from this either. A lot of people say, hey, he's better if you don't leave him as Swordmaster if you change him over to like Wolf Knight. And that comes with some caveats. Well, how do you get the knife access for Wolf Knight? You have to get Leaf back, I think. I think you have to have Leaf for knives. Maybe one of the other emblems can. I forget. Maybe Corrin can or something. But yeah, you have to get knife access in order to get him to Wolf Knight. He's not necessarily so much better. Like, he loses a point of speed, he gains a point of res, 2 points of magic, and 2 hit points. The big one is that he gains move, but he also loses the backup class for cavalry. And sometimes, some people might really care about that backup class. Yes, he's not a hero at base, and you could make him a hero, but he provides some utility in backup that he doesn't provide in cavalry. And Engage, in my mind, is kind of the peak of this. Every unit has some give and take, some balance to it. Even units like Ivy. Ivy makes the point maybe clearer. People say, hey, Lindworm Ivy isn't the best for her. Make her a Mage Knight or make her a Sage. And yes, if you make her a Mage Knight, that does shore up some of her speed issues. Because as Lindworm, that is the one thing the class doesn't have is it can have some speed issues. It doesn't fix her, but it helps. However, having a flying, a 6-move flyer with really high magic and really good bulk is oftentimes better for your army than having just another Mage Knight is. Sometimes it doesn't matter, sometimes it does. But because this is a unique niche that she can fulfill that other units can't, it's oftentimes better to consider that unique niche for your army than it is to just kind of make her another generic class just so the stats line up better. But, at the same time, that's worth considering, that's worth debating. Do you think the stats are more important? Do you think it's more important to have maybe cut out some of the uniqueness from your army, some of the unique roles people can fill, and narrow them down into a focus of, well, this is the one thing that I need you as? That can be important as well. That can be helpful. And this discussion really comes to a head when we talk about Fire Emblem Shadows of Valentia. Fire Emblem Gaiden too, but Shadows of Valentia. In Shadows of Valentia, as you can see on screen, you have villagers who can promote into a variety of classes, including Mercenary, Soldier, Archer, Mage, Cavalier, and if they're female, Pegasus Knight, and Cleric. Technically, Mercenary is male only. And I think Soldier might be male only? I don't know. I forget how it works. No, wait, is it because they have to... Yeah, whatever. Whatever, either way. Technically, because of the way that the stats work, because of the way that everything works out, if you want a numerically superior villager, you will promote them into Mercenary. However, if you promote all of your villagers into Mercenaries, you're going to run into some problems when you don't have enough swords to go around. When you fight the first Leather Shield Mercenary, if you don't have a mage in your party, you can have a really hard time because that unit has a lot of defense. You don't have any swords to boost your attack. You don't have any way to get around it. The game is built implying that you have a mage. You don't need a mage to beat him, but it's a real scrappy fight if you don't. And so the question then becomes, who do you sacrifice the stat potential of and turn into a mage in order for you to have an easier time through certain parts of the game, the early game, some parts of the mid game. What potential stats, what potential, better for this unit do you give up and say this is better for my army? And so the question becomes, okay, who do you make your mage? There are people who make Cliff their mage because he has the widest spell pool, and he's, canonically the mage if you read into all the hints and everything in the village. There are people who make Tobin the mage because of his more helpful utility spells and earlier access to Excalibur. There are people who make Faye the mage. I think she gets freeze access. There are people who make Gray the mage, even though he has no spells, because, hey, he has the better base stats, he doesn't need the stats as much, or, he falls off anyway. Who cares? Who cares why people do it? And there are people who make no one mages. There are people who try to make everyone mages. There's a lot of different things you can do, but Shadows of Valentia poses the question, okay, what's best for the unit in a vacuum is not what's best for your army in general. Like, what's best for the unit in a vacuum is make them mercenary, obviously. But what's best for your army in general is not necessarily to make everyone mercenaries. It's to fill what roles your army needs. And with Fire Emblem Engage, we see some of that. I wonder if I can find it here. Someone linked me a video recently where they talked about the various roles that you need to fill in your army. Where was it? And they say different categories. Some people say have different categories for themselves: magic, poison, staff, bow, backup, tank, mobility, or fast physical, magic, staff assist, staff offensive, tank, crowd control, anti-flyer, flyer, additional support. And different team roles, different compositions, figuring out what sort of composition you want for your army. I think that is a much more reasonable way to flesh out an army than just to say, hey, this unit's better at this class, this unit's better in this class, make all the units the class they, quote, want to be in, and then, you're left with a bunch of units in similar classes that all kind of compete for the same roles, and then your army as a whole is left lacking certain different parts. Like, a Mage Knight Ivy, really helps to fix her speed issues, really helps in a lot of different ways. However, making her a Mage Knight then means she loses staff access, and staff access can be a pretty important niche. It means she loses flying, and flying magic is a really unique niche. Only her and Hortensia have that, at least at base. Maybe some of the DLC will change that up, I don't know. And then so who you use and what you use, and Engage also gives you the emblems to kind of min-max and change up. It's like, hey, I have a tanky enough Gold Mary because I give her Ike. And then she has Brave Assist, Dual Assist Plus, and can be a spot tank with Ike. Meanwhile, I don't necessarily need to be using Ike and overcommit onto a single tank like with Louis, and then I can have Louis do other things. Maybe I want him to have Sigurd, maybe I just bench him, who knows. The variety of builds you can do in Engage is so interesting and so full of potential that just saying this unit should be this unit should be that, and closing the book, I find very, not bad faith exactly, like a bad faith argument, but I find very reductive and unhelpful. But anyway, what are your thoughts? Do you think Clanne needs to be a physical unit? Do you think the Shadows of Valentia villagers all really do want to be mercenaries? Do you think that, this idea of building an army comp instead of just the best individual units makes sense or works? Or do you think it's all hogwash and that I don't know what I'm talking about? Let me know your comments down below. Till then, this is Mythos Zenith signing out.